Reading books is fun. 4 years ago, it wasn't fun for me, but I decided that I wanted it to be fun to read. So I started forcing myself to do it often. And how I learned that skill of just forcing myself to do something until I like it, I mean, that's the most important skill I've ever started to learn. You know, um, in high school, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg, the next Christopher Nolan. And so I loved watching James Bond movies. Any movies where there's dudes shooting each other, I loved watching. And I started film studies class, IB Film Studies. It was a 2-year class in my high school. And, we started watching these old artsy-fartsy movies from France and stuff. And, the kind of movies where the main characters die at the end. And it was a different kind of movie, no one's shooting each other in these movies. And I realized that Steven Spielberg watched all these movies, Christopher Nolan watched all these movies, and I want to be like them. So I started forcing myself to watch these old black and white movies from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, in my parents' basement in high school. And after a while, I really enjoyed it. And now I can watch old movies, and it's fun. I did the same thing with books. With the movies, I started to see things in the movies that I didn't see before. The first time you see a French New Wave movie from the 60s or like an Italian, I don't even remember, it's been a while. I think it's called like Italian New Wave. Italian New Wave movies. The first time you see one, it's just, oh, this is one of those old movies. It's black and white. But if you see 10 of them, then it's like, oh, this is the old black and white movie where they're at parties the whole time. This is the black and white movie where it's about a guy and a girl talking about like philosophical stuff the whole time. And the guy is like on the run from the cops. And they're smoking cigarettes in a bed. When I was like 18, that was like really cool, That's the movie Breathless. Or in French, I think it's like A Bout de Soufflé or something. Or Seven Samurai. The first time I saw a clip of that, I was like, oh, that's cool, it's samurai. That makes me want to play like a samurai video game. But then I watched the whole movie and I was like, oh, that was actually kind of like a cowboy movie. Like the best cowboy movie I've ever seen, really. Because the characters were just like funny and interesting. And there was just a lot going on in Seven Samurai I'm talking about. And so, the movies become distinct after I watch a lot of them. And I start to tell them apart from each other, and I start to observe more about them and learn more about them because I'm used to watching them. And it's not just a black and white movie anymore. It's a movie like the Bicycle Thief. I think that's a short film. It's like a movie about a father and a son, and then the ending is really nice. It's like really poignant, It's like, wow, this is actually one of the best stories I've seen in a movie. It was so clearly communicated. This story was told so well in such a short time. I started to appreciate these old movies. So it's been the same way with books for the past 4 years. I just forced myself to start reading, and I realized, like movies, I'm not gonna just soak up any book. I should start with the ones that I want to watch a little bit. And after a while, it branches out like a tree. Like with movies, before I was into old movies, like let's say I liked Heat. That movie with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, it's like my favorite movie. That's like, right behind, maybe I can get into that in another video, but Heat, at first, I was like, oh, this is like James Bond. Because since I was basically born, I liked James Bond movies. And, I thought, okay, this is dudes in suits with guns. I like this, I watched it, and it had some effect on me. I was like, man, this affected me so deeply. The feeling that movie gave me, Heat. When I was, I think, 13, I watched it for the first time. It gave me such a, visceral impact, I couldn't explain at the time, but I thought, I want to do that. I want to make that. Same with the movie Inception, it's dudes in suits with guns. After a while, I started to appreciate over the years why Inception had such an effect on me. But it took me watching other movies, learning more about story, what was going on in Inception, what's the inspiration behind that movie, what the filmmaker was trying to do with that story. It took learning that stuff and rewatching the movie and going through life and seeing, appreciating more of the actual story side and less of the guns side. It took that for me to appreciate the depth of the story and what's actually going on there. So with Heat, it was the same kind of thing. Now when I watch Heat, I see it's like, this movie that's so cool with the aesthetics, the action, the realism, but it's also so artful with the characters. And it's kind of rare where it's this cops and robbers shoot 'em up movie, but it's also about relationships and professionalism. And I didn't realize it at the time when I was 13, but it's actually a lot of why I like that movie is because the idea of Robert De Niro's character, Al Pacino's character, what they are, it's like they have a path in life that they're set out to do. They know how to do one thing well, and they stick to that. That has nothing to do with guns or the suits or the cars. But when I was 13, that actually really did resonate with me because that's what my life was all about. It was about what am I going to do when I grow up? It was about who am I going to be and what is my skill going to be? At that time, I thought it would be making movies like that. And, when I was a teen, I can get more into Heat and why I love that movie in another video, but books have been the same way as movies have been, where the more I give them a little bit more of my time, a little bit more of my attention, the more I appreciate them, and the more my curiosity grows about other books. And from Heat, I started watching other movies, like that movie Driver that came out with Ryan Gosling, I don't know. It's a similar kind of thing. It's about professionalism, cars, guns, cool aesthetics. It's like James Bond, but Driver was like this lone wolf character. And then I looked up what's the inspiration behind Driver. It's the movie, or no, that movie's called Drive with Ryan Gosling. And then that was in the 2010s that movie came out, and I loved it when I saw it. Also the movie Nightcrawler. But that wasn't guns, that was Camera with Jake Gyllenhaal. Drive, I looked up what's the inspiration behind Drive, and it's this movie from the 70s called The Driver. And then I looked up what's the inspiration behind that, and it's Les Samurai from the 60s. It's a French movie with Alain Delon. And I watched that, and that's exactly about the same thing he does. It's the professionalism, this one guy who's really good at what he does. And in that movie, he has a gun. He's an assassin, basically. Les Samurai. And he's just cool. And, so there's this tree forming in my mind, this tree of curiosities. From James Bond, branches out to Heat, to Drive. From there, The Driver, Les Samurai. Les Samurai connects to other French, movies that I watched in IB Film Studies and then in college and like film school. And I started to see the influences of those French movies. And then the overlap back to Bond in the 60s with Les Samurai. So there's connections being formed. So it's like a tree branching out, these curiosities. It's the same way with books. It's been the same way with books for me. So I did not read. I was terrible at reading in elementary school. I remember in elementary school, I literally would sit there for an hour of reading. Or it was probably wasn't an hour, it's probably 30 minutes, but it felt like an hour in second grade, third grade. There'd be reading time for like 30 minutes. I would be on one page for 30 minutes and just completely lost about what's going on in the story because my mind would just wander and my reading comprehension was just terrible. And it was that way until high school. And then in high school, it got a little better. I was like a C+ student, C student, honestly, even through college until I quit college. But my reading comprehension was just terrible. I would be thinking about what's even going on in the story. I don't know if the character's sitting in a chair or if they already got up out of the chair. I might have missed that part. So I don't know, and then there'd be a word, I don't know what it means. Like cabinet. I wouldn't, second grade reading, I don't even know what a cabinet is. So it keeps talking about the cabinet. And I was too proud to ask someone what a cabinet is. I was the kind of person that was always, I know everything. I'm not going to ask for help. And so I would just be reading and it kept referencing a cabinet or something. And I don't know where the character is. Did the character get up and leave his house and that's where the cabinet is? Or is the cabinet like a kind of car? Or I was just completely lost with reading. And so I only read like 10 books, until the end of until halfway through high school. Then we started to read more. We started to read like To Kill a Mockingbird and Lord of the Flies, and those are the two I remember. And the IB curriculum in school really got me to think about stuff more and learn more, because the way we were learning was like writing essays instead of taking tests, and I really liked that. And there was a lot of discussions, Socratic seminars. I really liked that because it was the way my mind works, in like verbal processing. And I could get a good grade in IB from just like BSing, honestly, pretending like I know pretending like I read the book when I didn't really, but I'm making like, nice little jokes in the Socratic seminar. I would get, A's or B pluses in the Socratic seminars just for my rhetoric. And that was fun, even though a lot of the time I was just totally BSing. I wrote a whole paper on the triple entente without ever knowing what the triple entente was. I think that's something in like World War I. I still am not sure what that is. I should probably look it up. I wrote a whole paper on the triple entente, and I was just like, parroting what these scholars had talked about, the triple entente in the World War I. Maybe it was World War II. But I got like a B plus on that paper, or an A. So that was the downside of IB, that it kind of made me learn how to BS a lot. But my reading comprehension went up a lot. And then now I'm 30, so when I was 27, I finally started to try to read. Because honestly, it felt like movies, I ran out of good movies to watch. I just watched like, IMDb top 100 movies of all time. I watched like most of those, so I kind of got bored of movies, and I feel like I've seen all the good ones. Of course, that's not true, but that's how I felt, And so I started reading. And, the book I started with was Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, because I was going through a transformative time in my life, and I wanted to understand more about God. So I read Mere Christianity, and I kind of got bored and put it down. And then like a year later, I picked it up and read it all the way through, and it was incredible. And I went from there and read some more C.S. Lewis. And when I'm recording this video today, I still haven't read Lord of the Rings, but I plan to read that. I've read about Lord of the Rings a lot. I've listened to it on audio in parts many times. But I got into C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and listening to stuff about their lives. And that got my curiosity going a lot. And then I read Tolkien's On Fairy Stories, which is a nonfiction book where he talks about fiction and mythology and medieval history, medieval storytelling. And then I started to appreciate Lord of the Rings more. But I went from Mere Christianity to Screwtape Letters. I have Screwtape Letters here. I think I'm letting someone borrow Mere Christianity. I'm not sure if I have it here. But Mere Christianity actually connected to a book I read in high school, which was Siddhartha, which was another short book. I have a few copies of it. I like this one. This is a pretty little version of it. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And I read that in high school, and that was like transformative for me in high school. It was incredible to read. It's about spirituality. So that connected with Mere Christianity in my mind. So this tree is connecting already, this curiosity tree. And then Mere Christianity also connected to the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, also about spirituality. And from there, I started to read a little bit more. This is like all the books I've ever read, a lot of comic books. So I can get into that too. But I guess my point here is that if you want to learn how to read, if you want to get into reading, then maybe try what I tried, which is just following my curiosity. And my curiosity, I don't like when people say like follow your passion, because I think we all have a lot of passions. We all have a lot of curiosities. We all have a lot of interests. And it's been a lot more fruitful for me to follow the many different branches of my curiosity than following one focused passion. When I was 12, 13, if you asked me what my passion was, it would be filmmaking, making movies. And I wanted to be Christopher Nolan, I wanted to make Memento. I wanted to make Interstellar. I wanted to make Inception. I wanted to make The Dark Knight. Or the movie with Al Pacino, not Amnesia, Insomnia. That was a really good Nolan movie with Al Pacino. Anyway, I wanted to be Christopher Nolan when I was 12 or 13, and if someone asked me what my passion was, it would basically be to be Christopher Nolan, but there's already a Christopher Nolan. So I can't go and do that exact same thing. So if I followed my passion for filmmaking, I would quickly learn that I need to be my own person and make my own things, make my own art. And the best way I've found to do that and to learn more and grow more is following my curiosities, the many curiosities that branch out and reconnect sometimes and just keep branching out like a tree. So I guess I'm saying that, if you want to learn reading, you want to get into books, get into the huge world of books, then follow your curiosities and just read the stuff that you like. I personally finish books. I like to do that. It feels good to finish the book. But a lot of people say you don't have to finish every book. You can, read part of one. If you get bored, put it down, pick up another one you're interested in. I think as long as you're following your curiosities, even if they're small and you don't know where they'll lead, you think you know where they'll lead. You think it'll be a dead end or you'll get bored really quick. Follow them anyway, the little curiosities. That's how I've started to read when I was not a reader 4 years ago. Not a reader at all. So that's all I got for you. Like and subscribe if you want to know more. If you want to follow more about my journey with reading and my curiosities.